I want to tell you something about what happened to me last July, and I want to tell it straight, because I've been going back and forth for 9 months about whether to say anything at all. The reason I'm talking now is because storm season is coming back around, and there are people who are going to be in the same position I was, and they deserve to know what they're walking into. I don't work for the Park Service anymore. I don't work for anyone anymore, if I'm being honest. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Tess Brockway, and I'm 31 years old, and up until last summer I was a GS5 interpretive ranger on a seasonal contract at the Lamar Buffalo Ranch Field Campus, which is inside Yellowstone but feels like it's outside everything. I had a master's degree in environmental communications from the University of Montana, $43,000 in student debt, and a letter of recommendation from my thesis advisor that called me relentlessly competent. I had been applying to permanent federal positions for 4 years. I had been rejected from 19 of them. The seasonal gig at Lamar was my 5th consecutive summer contract with the National Park Service, and every September when it ended, I moved back into my mother's basement in Bozeman and picked up substitute teaching work until the next cycle opened. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand the kind of person I was when this started. Not brave, not reckless. Just someone who had built her entire adult identity around the idea that she was going to work in public lands forever, and who was watching that identity get thinner every year, and who would have done almost anything to make it stick. The Lamar Buffalo Ranch sits in the Lamar Valley, which is the northeast arm of Yellowstone, about an hour and a half from the nearest real town, which is Cook City, Montana, population 75 in winter. The valley is wide and gold and treeless in summer, and the sky sits on it like a lid, and at dusk the wolves come out along the ridgelines, and you can hear them testing the distance between themselves and everything else. It's one of the most beautiful places in North America, and one of the loneliest. The campus has a cluster of historic cabins, a small classroom building, a field kitchen, and a main operations cabin that functions as a ranger station during the summer season. Staff is usually 4 or 5 seasonal rangers plus a site supervisor who reports to the Tower Roosevelt district office. Cell service is non-existent. The radio works when it wants to. The nearest paved road is the northeast entrance road, which closes in winter and floods in spring, and is the only way in or out unless you're willing to hike 14 miles over the Mirror Plateau, which you're not. I arrived on June 9th. The site supervisor was a woman named Deborah Stalls, who had been running Lamar every summer for 11 years. Deb was 58, compact, silver-haired, and she had the particular quality of people who have been in the backcountry so long, they've stopped performing competence and started just being it. She scared me in a way I respected. The other seasonals were Marcus, a 24-year-old wildlife biotech who was there to monitor wolf pack movements, Angie, a 27-year-old interpretive ranger like me who had done 2 previous seasons, and Reese, a 22-year-old maintenance worker on his first contract who talked too much about elk and had a crush on Angie that he thought was subtle, but was not. I spent the first 2 weeks doing what you do at any new post, learning the trails, memorizing the radio protocol, practicing my campfire talks, getting my bearings. I was good at the work. I'd always been good at the work. That was the part that made the rejection cycle so brutal. I wasn't failing. I was succeeding at a job that refused to become permanent. But I told myself this was the year. I told myself Deb would see what I could do and put in a word with Tower Roosevelt, and that word would become a referral, and that referral would become an interview, and that interview would become a GS7 with benefits and a lease on an apartment in Gardner and a life that didn't evaporate every September. That hope is relevant. That hope is how it got me. The storm protocol was not in the onboarding packet. The onboarding packet was a blue 3-ring binder that Deb gave each of us on our first day, and it covered everything you'd expect, radio frequencies, emergency contacts, bear encounter procedures, fire evacuation routes, vehicle checkout, the rule about not leaving food in the cabins, standard NPS stuff. I read it front to back twice because that's who I am. I asked Deb clarifying questions. She answered them patiently. None of that is what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the laminated card. July 3rd. I'd been on site for almost a month. That afternoon, Deb called me into the operations cabin alone, which she had never done before. She was sitting at the desk with 2 mugs of coffee and a manila envelope, and she told me to shut the door. I remember the light. It was that thick yellow afternoon light you get in the valley when the air is full of pollen and heat. The cabin smelled like pine resin and old paper. Deb slid the envelope across the desk and told me to open it. Inside was a single laminated card, about the size of an index card, printed in a plain serif font. No NPS letterhead, no official formatting, just text. She told me to read it. I read it, and I want to give it to you exactly as it was printed, because the phrasing matters. Lamar Valley Field Station. Storm Protocol, Electrical. This protocol is supplementary to NPS standard severe weather procedures and applies only to electrical storms over the Lamar Valley with simultaneous conditions. Cloud-to-ground lightning visible from the station, air temperature drop of 15 degrees Fahrenheit or more within 30 minutes, static discharge audible on AM radio band. When all 3 conditions are met simultaneously, the following actions are mandatory. 1. All personnel must be inside a permanent structure within 4 minutes of condition confirmation. Vehicles do not count. Tents do not count. 2. All exterior-facing windows in the operations cabin must be covered using the blackout panels stored in the supply closet. Cabin windows in residential buildings should be covered with whatever is available. Do not look out. 3. Shut off all electric lights. Battery lanterns on red setting only. No white light. 4. Do not use the radio for any reason during an active electrical storm meeting these conditions. Do not attempt contact with Tower Roosevelt, Cook City, or any other station. The radio will receive. Do not respond to what it receives. 5. If you hear knocking at any exterior door, do not answer. If the knocking identifies itself using the name of any current or former Lamar staff member, do not answer. If it identifies itself using your name, move to the interior room farthest from the door and do not speak. 6. You may hear what sounds like a large group of people walking through the valley. You may hear them speaking. The language will be unfamiliar. Do not attempt to identify the language. Do not write down what you hear. Do not record it. 7. The storm will end. When it ends, the silence will be absolute. Count slowly to 600. If no sound resumes after the count, the protocol is over. Open the blackout panels. Resume normal operations. Do not discuss the storm with anyone outside this station. 8. If during the storm you see light through or around the blackout panels, moving, colored, or pulsing, close your eyes and keep them closed until the light stops. This is not lightning. Do not investigate. 9. Every person present during an electrical storm meeting these conditions must, within 24 hours, mark the date, time, and duration in the Red Logbook stored in the operations cabin desk. Do not add details. Date, time, duration only. I read it twice. Then I looked at Deb. She was watching me with an expression I couldn't parse at the time. I can now. It was evaluation. She was watching to see what kind of question I would ask first, because the question would tell her what kind of person I was, and the kind of person I was would determine what she told me next. I asked, "How often does this happen?" She said, 3 to 5 times a season, sometimes more. I asked, "Is this official NPS protocol?" She said, "No." I asked, "Then who wrote it?" She said, "I did." based on what the person before me told me, based on what the person before her told her. I asked, "How far back does it go?" She said, "I don't know. I've been here 11 years and it was already old when I got it." I had more questions. Obviously, I had more questions. But something in the way she was sitting, leaned back, arms crossed, coffee untouched, told me the conversation was structured, that she had done this before with other new people, and that the structure was deliberate. So I asked the question she was waiting for. What happens if you don't follow it? Deb picked up her coffee. She drank. She set it down. Then she said, "In 2019, a seasonal named Kevin Aldiss was on site during a storm that met the conditions. He was alone in his cabin. He did not cover his windows. He looked out. He walked outside. He walked into the valley. We found him the next morning about 1.5 miles northwest of the station, sitting in the grass, alive, conscious, and unresponsive. He could not speak. He could not write. He could not make eye contact. He was breathing and blinking, and his heart was beating, and everything else was gone. They medevaced him to Billings. I called the hospital 3 weeks later, and they said he had not changed. I called again in November, and they said the same thing. I stopped calling. I said nothing. "I am not going to tell you to believe me," Deb said. "I am going to tell you that the laminated card stays in this envelope, the envelope stays in this desk, and when the conditions are met, you follow it. That's the job." "Do Marcus and Angie and Reese know?" "Marcus and Angie have both been through it. Reese will get this conversation next week." "Why not on the first day? Why not put it in the binder?" "Because if I gave you this on your first day, you'd think I was crazy and you'd spend the whole season looking at me sideways instead of doing your job. I give it to people after I've watched them work, after I know they're serious. You're serious, Tess." There it was, the thing I wanted. Deb Stalls, 11-year veteran of the most remote field station in the park, telling me I was serious, telling me I was the kind of person who could be trusted with the real work. It went into me like a hook. I said I understood. I said I'd follow the protocol. I took the laminated card back to my cabin, and I read it 4 more times, and then I put it in my nightstand drawer. And I lay on my bunk and stared at the ceiling and listened to the valley wind, and told myself it was probably just some weird institutional superstition, like how smoke jumpers carry lucky coins or how trail crews won't whistle after dark. Backcountry people are like that. They accumulate rituals. It doesn't mean anything. Except Deb wasn't a ritual person. Deb was the most empirical human being I had ever met. She identified wildflowers by Latin binomial. She calibrated the weather station herself. She once corrected a visiting geologist on the specific rhyolite composition of the Absaroka Range. And she was right. If Deb said cover the windows, there was a reason to cover the windows. 12 days later, I found out what the reason was. July 15th. The afternoon started hot and still. By 4 o'clock, the sky over the Absarokas had turned the color of a bruise. Not gray, not black, but a swollen purple-green that I had never seen before and that made my teeth hurt in a way I can't explain. By 4:30, the temperature had dropped from 89 to 71. Marcus was in the operations cabin checking the weather instruments, and he called out to Deb, who was on the porch, and said, "Temp's falling fast, 15 degrees in 22 minutes. Deb didn't even look at the sky. She looked at me. "Get the panels," she said. Her voice was calm. Her hands were not. The blackout panels were in the supply closet in the operations cabin. Heavy black fabric stretched over lightweight aluminum frames, sized to fit each window exactly. There were 8 of them. I carried them out, and Deb and Marcus and I started mounting them. Angie came running from the classroom building. Reese came out of his cabin looking confused. Deb had given him the laminated card conversation 3 days earlier, and he had clearly filed it under weird boss stuff and moved on. "Reese!" Deb's voice cracked across the compound. "Get inside, now. Your cabin or the ops cabin, choose." He chose the ops cabin, probably because everyone else was heading there. Good. Deb wanted us together. By 4:47, the last panel was up. The cabin went dark. Marcus turned on a battery lantern and switched it to the red setting, and the room filled with a dim, ruddy glow that made everyone look like they were standing in a dark room. Deb checked her watch. She checked the AM radio. Not to use it, just to confirm. I could hear it from across the room, a steady, crackling hiss that wasn't static. It was too regular, too rhythmic, like something breathing through a broken speaker. "Conditions met," Deb said. "Protocol is active. Nobody talks to the radio. Nobody opens a door. Nobody looks outside. We wait." Reese said, "For how long?" "Until it's over." "How do we know when?" "You'll know." The first lightning strike hit at 4:52. I didn't see it, but I felt it, a vibration that came up through the floor and into my ankles, and I swear I felt it in my fillings. The thunder followed immediately. Not a rumble, but a crack. A single percussive detonation that sounded like a building falling. Then another. Then another. The strikes were coming so fast, they overlapped, and the cabin shook with each one. And the blackout panels flexed inward like something was pressing on them from outside. I was standing near the back wall, next to the desk where the Red Logbook was. Marcus was by the radio, which he had unplugged but which was still hissing, still breathing on battery backup. Angie was sitting on the floor with her knees up and her eyes closed and her lips moving silently. Reese was standing in the middle of the room looking at each of us in turn, trying to figure out whether we were scared or performing scared, and not liking either answer. The lightning stopped. It stopped all at once, between 1 second and the next, as if someone had flipped a switch. And then came the silence. Not quiet. Silence. The kind of silence that has weight. The kind you can feel on your skin. I have been in remote wilderness my entire adult life, and I have never experienced the absence of sound the way I experienced it in that cabin. No wind, no insects, no birds, no ground settling. Nothing. It was the silence of a room that has been sealed and buried, except we were above ground on an open valley floor, and it was the middle of July. And then, in the silence, the walking started. I don't know how else to describe it. It was the sound of a large number of people. I mean a large number, dozens, maybe more. Walking through the valley outside the cabin, not marching. Walking. At a steady, unhurried pace. The footsteps were soft and continuous, and they came from the south and moved north, and there were so many of them that the sound blurred together into a kind of living hush, like tall grass being pushed down by something very wide. Then the voices. They started low. A murmur, a collective sound, like a congregation before the sermon starts, that hum of human presence that isn't words yet. Then it resolved into something that was almost words. Phonemes, cadence, the architecture of language, but no language I recognized. And I have a master's degree. I took linguistics electives. I've heard recordings of dozens of indigenous and historical languages. This wasn't any of them. It wasn't even the absence of recognition you get when you hear a language you simply haven't encountered. It was something else. It was language that your brain refused to categorize. Not foreign, not familiar. Just wrong in a way that made your mind slide off it like water off a hot pan. I looked at Marcus. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles in his neck jumping. I looked at Angie. Her eyes were still closed. Her lips were still moving. Reese whispered, "What the fuck is that?" Deb said quietly but with absolute authority, "Don't listen." "I can't not listen. It's right outside." "Don't try to understand it. Let it pass through you. Don't hold on to any of it." I did what Deb said. I let the sound wash over me and I did not reach for it. It was one of the hardest things I have ever done, because I am a person who reaches. My entire career, my entire identity is built on reaching for understanding. I see something I don't know and I move toward it. I catalog it. I interpret it. That is literally my job title. Interpretive Ranger. I interpret things for people. And this sound was right there, this close to meaning. And I could feel my brain lunging for it the way a dog lunges for a scent, and I had to hold myself back with both hands. The walking and the voices lasted 11 minutes. I know because I was watching the clock on the wall, which was battery-powered and still running. 11 minutes of that massive, steady, impossible procession moving through the valley outside our covered windows. Then it stopped. All of it. The silence came back heavier than before. Deb started counting. I could see her lips moving. I counted with her. 600 seconds. 10 minutes. The longest 10 minutes of my life up to that point. At the end of the count, Deb stood up. She walked to the nearest blackout panel. She listened. She removed it. The window showed the valley in golden evening light, empty and still, the grass undisturbed, the sky clearing to pale blue. "Protocol's over," she said. "Log it." Marcus logged it. Date July 15th. Time 4:52 p.m. to 5:14 p.m. Duration 22 minutes. Reese sat down on the floor and put his head between his knees. Nobody said anything to him. Nobody said much of anything to anyone. We made dinner. We ate. We went to our cabins. I lay in my bunk and listened to the valley come back to life. Crickets first, then a coyote, then the wind. And I thought about the sound of those voices and how close I had come to understanding them, and how I couldn't remember a single syllable. Not one. It was already gone. Like a dream you lose before your feet hit the floor. That was the first storm. I followed the protocol. I did everything right. And I would have kept doing everything right for the rest of the season if the second storm hadn't come on July 28th. And if the second storm hadn't been different. The conditions came on fast. Temperature drop, visible lightning, the AM radio hiss. We ran the protocol. Panels up, lights out, red lanterns, doors sealed, the lightning, the silence, the walking. But this time, during the walking, the radio spoke. Not hissed. Spoke. In a human voice. In English. It said, "Lamar Station, this is Tower Roosevelt, do you copy? We have a hiker emergency on Specimen Ridge, party of 3, one with a broken femur, requesting immediate assistance. Do you copy?" Marcus reached for the radio. Deb caught his wrist. "It's not Tower," she said. "It sounds exactly like..." "It's not Tower. Read Rule 4. Marcus pulled his hand back. But his face was anguished, and I understood why. We were Park Service. Our entire purpose was responding to emergencies. If there really was a hiker with a broken femur on Specimen Ridge in an electrical storm, they could die. Refusing to respond went against everything we had been trained to do, everything we believed in, everything that made us who we were. The radio spoke again. "Lamar Station, please respond. Patient is going into shock. We need your GPS coordinates for the helicopter. Please respond." Angie made a sound, a small, pained sound. "It's not real," Deb said. "There is no helicopter flying in this. There is no hiker. Listen to the voice. Really listen." I listened, and I heard it. The voice was perfect. The cadence, the terminology, the slight crackle of radio transmission, but underneath it, just barely, like a watermark, there was a second sound. The same not language from outside, the same murmuring crowd, as if the English words were a thin film stretched over something else, and the something else was leaking through. The radio kept talking. It escalated. The hiker was dying. The hiker's daughter was with him. The daughter was 14. The daughter was screaming. Could we hear the screaming? We could hear the screaming. A girl's voice, high and ragged, coming through the speaker, begging for help. Reese was crying. Silently, standing in the corner, tears running down his face, because he was 22 years old, and he was hearing a child scream, and he was doing nothing. "It's not real," Deb said again, and her voice was shaking now too. "It cannot reach you if you do not answer. But if you answer, it knows you're here. Do you understand? Right now it is passing through. It passes through every time, but if you answer, it stops." The girl on the radio screamed a name. My name. "Tess, Tess, please, my dad is dying. Please help us, we can see your station, we're so close." I did not answer. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood, and I did not answer. And the storm passed, and the silence came, and we counted to 600. And it was over. The valley was empty. There was no hiker. There was no daughter. There was no one on Specimen Ridge. Marcus checked the next day by hiking the ridge himself. Nothing. No tracks. No blood. No sign of anyone. The Red Logbook entry for July 28th reads, date, July 28th, time, 6:11 p.m. to 6:38 p.m., duration, 27 minutes. It does not mention the radio. It does not mention the screaming girl. It does not mention that I heard my own name come out of a speaker that wasn't connected to anything real. Date, time, duration. That's what the protocol says. That's what we wrote. But here's the thing that stayed with me. The thing that started the crack. After the second storm, after we reopened the windows and the valley came back, I went to the desk and pulled out the Red Logbook to make the entry. And while I was writing, I flipped back through the previous pages. I wasn't supposed to. The protocol says date, time, duration only. It doesn't say don't read the other entries. And the entries were exactly what you'd expect. Dates and times and durations going back years, all in different handwriting, all following the format. Except for one. An entry from August 2017 in handwriting I didn't recognize. The date, time, and duration were there. And then below them, and in smaller writing pressed hard into the paper, was a single additional line. It was not passing through. It was looking for someone. That's all. No name, no context. Just that one sentence breaking the protocol, scratched into the logbook by someone who needed to say it badly enough to violate the rules. I closed the logbook. I put it back in the desk. I did not mention it to Deb. But I could not stop thinking about it, because the protocol was built on a specific assumption, that the thing outside was transient, that it moved through the valley during electrical storms the way weather moves through, impersonal and undirected, dangerous only to people who put themselves in its path. The rules were shelter-in-place rules. They were the rules you make for a tornado, not for a predator. But what if the thing wasn't weather? What if it was looking? I want to stop here and tell you about the Lamar Valley specifically because it matters. The Lamar Valley is one of the oldest continuously used travel corridors in North America. Archaeological evidence of human use goes back over 11,000 years. It was a route for the Tukudika, the Shoshone people who lived in the Yellowstone High Country, and before them, other peoples whose names we don't know. The valley was a passage, a way through the mountains, and the mountains around it, the Absaroka Range, are volcanic. The whole region is volcanic. You know this if you know anything about Yellowstone. It sits on a supervolcano, a hot spot in the Earth's mantle, and the geothermal energy under the park is alive and continuous and older than anything that has ever walked on top of it. I thought about this a lot after the second storm. I thought about what it would mean if the valley had been a passage for something else too, something that used the same route humans used, for the same reason. Because the mountains forced everything through the same narrow door, And I thought about what it would mean if that something traveled during electrical storms specifically. Because the storms did something to the valley, opened something or thinned something, the way water thins ice until you can see through it. This is the point where in any other summer, I would have filed the thought away and moved on. I had work to do. I had campfire talks to give and trail assessments to run and a permanent position to earn. I should have let it go. But the protocol said don't write down what you hear, and I hadn't. And the protocol said don't discuss the storm outside the station, and I hadn't. And the protocol said don't look out, and I hadn't. I had followed every rule. I had been good, and being good hadn't answered a single question. It had only taught me that the questions existed. So I did something that wasn't in the protocol and wasn't outside it either, because the protocol didn't address it. I went looking for the old logbooks. The operations cabin had been in use since the 1930s, when the Buffalo Ranch was an actual buffalo ranch. The NPS used to raise bison there to prevent the species from going extinct, which is one of those details about Yellowstone that sounds made up but isn't. The cabin had been modified over the decades, and the back storage room was full of old equipment, outdated maps, and boxes of paperwork that nobody had organized since the Clinton administration. I went in there on the evening of August 1st, while Deb was out on a wolf observation, and Marcus was running his telemetry survey, and Angie and Reese were in their cabins, and I looked for red logbooks. I found 4. They were in a cardboard box under a broken snowshoe, and they spanned from 1987 to 2014. The current logbook started in 2015, so together they covered almost 40 years of storm protocol entries. I sat on the floor of the storage room with a headlamp and I read them all. The entries were what you'd expect: dates, times, durations, dozens of them, 3 to 7 per summer, consistent across decades. The handwriting changed as staff rotated. The durations ranged from 9 minutes to 41 minutes. The format never varied, except that it did. Because scattered among the clean entries, I found 6 more violations. 6 more people who had written something extra, something they weren't supposed to write. I copied them onto a piece of paper which I am looking at right now. This is what they said, in chronological order. 1987, duration increasing. 1993, walked back south tonight. First time this season it has reversed direction. 1999, 3 storms in 6 days. The gap is getting shorter. It's coming back faster. 2003, the radio spoke in Crow language tonight. None of us speak Crow. I asked a friend at Little Bighorn who does. She said the words were, "Open the road, we are carrying someone home." She asked where I heard it. I did not tell her. 2009, I covered the windows but I saw through them anyway. Not through a gap, through the material, like it was glass. I could see the valley and it was full. I cannot say of what. My vision has been wrong since. Colors are different. I am going to resign. 2017. It was not passing through. It was looking for someone. I sat with that piece of paper for a long time. Then I put the logbooks back in the box and the box back under the snowshoe, and I went to my cabin, and I did not sleep. Here is what the entries told me, taken together. The phenomenon was not static. It was changing. Over 40 years, the storms were getting more frequent. The durations were getting longer. The behavior was becoming more complex, and at least twice. The radio speaking in Crow, the person who saw through the panels. It had demonstrated an awareness of the people inside the station. It was not weather. It was not a natural phenomenon cycling through its pattern like tides or seasons. It was responsive. It was learning. And the protocol, Deb's protocol, passed down through however many supervisors, was a set of rules designed for the version of the thing that existed when the rules were written, a version that passed through, a version that didn't look. The rules were obsolete. and the person who wrote them either didn't know or didn't care. And Deb, who maintained them with such ironclad certainty, had been following them for 11 years and had never once questioned whether they were keeping up with the thing they were supposed to manage. I almost told her. On August 3rd, I walked to the operations cabin with the intention of laying it all out. The old logbooks, the extra entries, the pattern of escalation. I was going to be professional about it. I was going to present data. This was, after all, the kind of thing a permanent ranger would do. Identify a problem, escalate it, propose a solution. This was me being the person I wanted to be hired as. I got to the porch and I stopped, because I realized something. Deb already knew. She had been here for 11 years. She had been through 40, 50, maybe 60 of these storms. She had seen the durations lengthen and the behavior change and the radio evolve from static to speech. She had lived through the 2017 storm when someone wrote it was looking for someone, and the 2019 incident when Kevin Aldiss walked out and never came back. She had been present for all of it, and she was still using the same laminated card. Which meant one of two things. Either Deb genuinely believed the old protocol was still sufficient, which was hard to square with how smart she was, or she knew the protocol was insufficient, and she was using it anyway because the alternative was admitting there was no protocol that would work, and admitting that would mean closing the station. And closing the station would mean the thing in the valley would pass through with no one watching, no one logging, no one maintaining even the fiction of management. The protocol wasn't a shield. It was a clipboard. It was the thing you hold so your hands aren't empty. I didn't talk to Deb. I went back to my cabin. And I did something I'm not proud of. I started making my own observations. Not during the storms. I wasn't suicidal. But between the storms, I started paying attention to the valley in a way I hadn't before. I started waking up early and sitting on the porch of my cabin in the gray pre-dawn light and watching the grasslands for patterns. I started noting the behavior of the wildlife, the bison, the wolves, the elk, in the hours before and after electrical storms. I started keeping a private journal. I started without meaning to, building my own record. And I found things. The bison would not graze in the center of the valley on days when a storm was coming. They moved to the edges, pressing against the tree line as early as dawn on storm days, 6 or 8 hours before any atmospheric indicators appeared. They knew. Whatever signal preceded the storms, the bison could read it before the instruments could. The wolves behaved differently. On storm days, the Lamar Canyon pack, which Marcus was tracking, would go completely silent. No howling, no movement. They denned up and stayed still, as if they were following their own protocol. I asked Marcus about it, casually, without mentioning the storms. He said, yeah, it was weird. Some days the whole pack just went dark and he couldn't get a fix on any of them. And it didn't correlate with any known behavioral pattern. He was planning to write it up in his seasonal report as an anomaly. I also noticed the grass. On the mornings after storms, the grass in the center of the valley was pressed flat in a wide band running roughly north-south. Not randomly, the way wind flattens grass, systematically, in a track, like a column of foot traffic had moved through it. The track was about 30 feet wide and it ran as far as I could see in both directions from the southern end of the valley where it narrowed between the hills to the northern end where it opened toward the confluence of the Lamar River and Soda Butte Creek. A path, a road, a corridor worn into the grass by repeated use. I measured it. I photographed it. I did this 3 times after 3 different storms, and the path was always in the same place, give or take a few feet. It was real. It was physical. Whatever was walking through the valley during the storms was heavy enough, real enough, numerous enough to leave a mark. I was still being careful. I was still following the protocol. I hadn't broken a single rule. I was just looking at the aftermath, which the rules didn't prohibit, because the rules assumed the aftermath was nothing. The rules assumed the thing came and went and left no trace. But the rules were wrong. On August 11th, the sky turned that bruised purple-green again at mid-afternoon. The temperature dropped. The radio hissed. Deb called the protocol. We went through the motions. Panels, red light, silence. The walking started. The voices started. The radio started. This time, the radio didn't pretend to be Tower Roosevelt. It didn't simulate an emergency. It said something else, in English, in a voice I didn't recognize but which had that same watermark of not language underneath it. It said, Tess Brockway is watching. Tess Brockway is recording. Tess Brockway is building a map. The cabin went absolutely still. 4 pairs of eyes turned to me in the red light. I stopped breathing. The radio continued. We can use a map. We have been walking this road for a very long time and we do not know where it goes. Tess Brockway is watching and she knows things about the road that we do not. We would like to speak with Tess Brockway. We would like to walk with Tess Brockway. We would like Tess Brockway to show us where the road goes. Deb turned the radio off, not just the volume. She pulled the battery backup cable out of the unit. The radio went dead. But the voice didn't stop. It continued, sourceless in the air of the cabin, in the walls, in the floor, resonating through the structure itself. We are not unkind. We are not angry. We are lost. We have been lost for longer than your species has had language to describe time. The road was clear once. It went somewhere. We can no longer find the end. We walk, and we walk, and we walk, and we arrive back at the beginning. Tess Brockway has been watching the road. Tess Brockway has been measuring the road. Tess Brockway may know something. We do not. Tess, Deb's voice was a blade. Do not respond. I'm not, I whispered. I'm not responding. We can hear you. We could always hear you. The walls are not walls to us. The rules are not rules to us. The rules are courtesies we have extended because we do not wish to frighten. But we are tired of the road. We have walked this road since before the mountains rose. We have walked this road since the fire under the earth was on the surface. We would like to stop. We would like to arrive. The voice paused. The walking outside continued. That steady, massive, shuffling passage. And then the voice said, The road has a door. The door is in the valley. We walk past it every time and we cannot see it. But someone who stands still can see things that someone who walks cannot. Tess Brockway stands still. Tess Brockway watches. Will Tess Brockway show us the door? The storm ended. The silence fell. We counted to 600. Deb pulled the panels down. The valley was empty. The grass was pressed flat in the familiar band. The evening was golden and still. Nobody spoke for a long time. Then Deb looked at me and said, What did you do? I told her, all of it. The old logbooks, the extra entries, the bison patterns, the wolf silence, the grass track, the photographs, the measurements, the private journal. I told her everything because there was no point in hiding it, and because I was terrified, and because the thing in the valley knew my full name and what I had been doing. And it had asked me for help, and the request had not sounded like a threat. It had sounded like grief. Deb listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a while. Then she said, Kevin Aldiss was doing the same thing. The air went out of the room. Not the measurements. He wasn't systematic the way you are. But he was curious. He was watching. He was trying to understand. And during the storm on August 14th, 2019, something spoke to him the way it just spoke to you, and he answered. He answered the radio? He answered the voice. He went to the door of the cabin and he opened it and he said, I'm here. And then he walked out. and by the time I got the door closed again, he was 50 yards into the valley and moving fast, and we couldn't follow because the storm was still active. And the next morning we found him sitting in the grass, empty. The Kevin Aldiss that walked out of the cabin was not the Kevin Aldiss we found in the morning. What happened to him? I think he showed them something, and I think whatever he showed them, it wasn't enough. And when they were done with him, they put the body back, but they didn't put him back. Because they didn't know how. Because they're not cruel, Tess. They're just incompatible with us. Whatever they are, they operate on a scale and in a mode that doesn't interface with human consciousness without destroying it. Kevin didn't die. He was overwritten. I sat down because my legs wouldn't hold me. The protocol, Deb said, is not a solution. The protocol is a delay. The thing in the valley has been walking the same path for longer than human beings have existed, and it is stuck, and it is desperate. And every year it gets a little more capable of communicating that desperation. The rules I gave you are the best rules we have, and they are not good enough, and they have never been good enough, and they are all we have. Then why? Because the alternative is nothing. Because this station exists to monitor this valley, and this valley exists because the road exists, and the road exists because the thing walking it cannot stop. And somebody has to be here. Somebody has to watch. Somebody has to maintain the fiction that watching is enough, because if we stop watching, if we close the station, if we leave the valley empty, then the next hiker or tourist or lost backpacker who wanders through during a storm becomes the next Kevin Aldiss. We're not here to stop it. We're here to make sure it doesn't find a civilian. Deb, it knows my name. It asked me specifically. And you will not answer. But what if I actually know something? What if the measurements, the grass track, the path? What if I've actually found something about the road that matters? What if I could help them? Deb looked at me with an expression I now recognize as love. Not affection, not mentorship. Love, the kind that has iron in it, the kind that says no and means it. Kevin thought that too, she said. Kevin was a kind person who heard something suffering and wanted to help. That is a beautiful impulse, and it destroyed him. Whatever is walking that road is not something you can help by joining it. It is not something you can solve by understanding. It is something so large and so old and so fundamentally alien that contact with it does to a human mind what a boot does to an anthill. Not out of malice, out of proportion. You are too small, Tess. I am too small. The human mind is too small, and the thing in the valley doesn't know that, because it doesn't know what a human mind is. It just knows you were watching, and it wants what you have, and if you give it to it, there will be nothing left of you to miss what's gone. I spent the rest of that night in the operations cabin with Deb. She made coffee. She told me about the other incidents, not many, but enough. A researcher in 2004 who started corresponding with the voice through handwritten notes left in the grass. She'd write a question, leave it in the path, and find an answer pressed into the earth the next morning, not written but impressed, as if the words had been formed by the weight of something standing on the ground. She did this for 3 weeks, and then she drove to Cook City and kept driving and never came back and never responded to any communication again. Her notes were in the storage room, in a box Deb had hidden behind the water heater. I did not ask to see them. There was a volunteer in 2011 who followed the protocol perfectly, but who dreamed about the road every night and who woke up one morning walking. Not sleepwalking. Walking in a straight line through the valley, conscious but unable to stop, as if her legs belonged to something else. 2 other staffers tackled her a quarter-mile from the station. She was awake the entire time, and she was screaming. There was Deb herself, in her 3rd year, who made the mistake of humming during a storm, just humming, a song her mother used to sing, and the voices outside shifted. They began to harmonize. They took her mother's melody and they carried it in hundreds of voices, in that not language, transforming it into something enormous and unbearable and beautiful. And Deb said she stood in the middle of the cabin and cried and felt more connected to her dead mother than she had in 20 years. And she walked to the door and she put her hand on the handle and she did not open it. She said the only reason she didn't open it was because her mother would have told her not to. And that was the last time she ever made a sound during a storm. And she has not hummed or sung since. Not during storms. Not ever. 7 years of silence in the place where music used to be. That is what the valley takes. Not your life. Your capacity. The specific human thing that makes you you. It takes the reaching, the curiosity, the music, the compassion. It takes the best part, and it doesn't even know it's doing it. The same way you don't know you're crushing ants when you walk through grass. August 14th. I need you to hear what I'm about to tell you carefully, because this is the part that made me leave. And it's the part that keeps me up at night. And it's the part I've been circling for this entire story. August 14th was the anniversary of Kevin Aldiss walking into the valley. I did not know this when I woke up. I only learned it later from the logbook when I checked the date. But I think the valley knew, because the storm that came on August 14th was unlike any of the others. It started at midnight, not afternoon. Midnight. I was asleep in my cabin when the temperature drop woke me, not gradually but all at once, as if someone had opened a freezer door. I could see my breath. I grabbed the laminated card, I grabbed my headlamp, and I ran for the operations cabin in the dark. I did not make it. I was halfway across the compound when the lightning started, and it was not in the sky. It was in the ground. The valley floor was flickering with pale blue-white light, running through the grass in veins and networks, like bioluminescence, like the Earth's circulatory system had become visible, and in that light I could see the road. Not the pressed grass, the actual road, the thing the grass had been covering. It was wide and pale, and it ran through the center of the valley like a scar, and it was made of something that was not stone and not metal and not organic. Something that glowed with its own internal light. Something that had been there for so long that the geology had built up around it the way a tree grows around a nail. And on the road, walking, were the travelers. I saw them. I was not supposed to see them. The protocol said cover the windows, and I was not behind a window. I was standing in the open compound in the middle of the night, and the blackout panels were inside the cabin I hadn't reached, and I saw them. They were not human. I want to be clear about this. They were not ghosts. They were not spirits. They were not any category of thing I have a word for. They were large. Taller than the bison. Taller than the trees at the valley's edge. And they were numerous, and they moved with a slow, exhausted, relentless gait that communicated something I understood instantly and completely. They had been walking for an unthinkable length of time, and they could not stop. I cannot describe what they looked like because my visual processing did what the protocol was designed to prevent. It broke. For a period I cannot precisely quantify. I did not see with human eyes. I saw with something older and wider and more capable. And what I saw in that wider sight was the road stretching in both directions to a distance that was not measurable in miles or light years, but in something else. Some unit of displacement that included time and space and other axes I do not have names for. The road was long. The road was very, very long, and it had no end. It looped. It turned back on itself in a topology I could sense but not hold in my mind, and the travelers had been walking it forever, and they were so tired, and they could feel the door, the way you can feel a window in a dark room by the faint change in temperature as you pass it. And they knew the door was in this valley, in this specific stretch of the road, and they walked past it every time. and they could not find it, and they were in a pain so old it had become the road itself. I understood all of this in the span of about 4 seconds, and then the wider sight began to contract, and my human vision came back, and I was standing in the compound, and the travelers were still walking, and one of them turned its attention to me. Not its head, its attention, the way you can feel someone looking at you in a crowded room, an immensity focused on a point. It spoke, not through the radio, not through the walls. To me, it said, "You can see the road." I said nothing. My mouth was open. I could not move. "You can see the road, and you can see that it has no door. This is what we needed to know. There is no door. We were right. It closed. It closed a long time ago." The attention shifted, not away from me, through me, as if it was looking at something behind my eyes. "But you can see where it was. You are standing near where it was. The ground remembers the door even though the door is gone. The fire under the earth remembers. The road remembers. And now, you remember." I felt it, something settling into my mind, not a thought, not a memory, a shape, a geometric shape that I could perceive but not describe, a structure that was the ghost of the door, the after-image of an opening that had existed in this valley when the Yellowstone hotspot was young and the road was new and the travelers could come and go. The shape was in me. It was in me the way you know your own name, effortless, permanent, ineradicable. "You could open it again," the traveler said. "You are too small to hold it, but you could open it for a moment. A moment would be enough. We are very fast when we can see where to go." Deb hit me from the side, full body tackle. We went down hard on the gravel path. She was screaming my name and dragging me by my jacket toward the operations cabin, and the compound was full of that blue-white light and the air was full of sound, and I was looking up at the sky, and the sky was the road and the road was full of walkers, and the walkers were looking down at me with something that I swear to you was hope. Deb got me inside. She slammed the door. She put up the panels. She held me on the floor of the cabin with her body weight, and she said my name over and over and over until the storm passed and the silence fell, and she counted to 600, and it was over. I could still see the shape, in my mind. The door that wasn't there anymore, the ghost geometry of an exit. I could feel it the way you feel a loose tooth with your tongue. A gap, a wrongness, a place where something used to be. "It's in me," I told Deb. "I can feel it. The shape of the door." "I know," she said. "The same thing happened to the researcher in 2004. The same thing happened to Kevin. Deb, they're lost. They're in pain. They've been walking for... I know what they are and I know what they want, and the answer is no." "Why?" "Because Kevin said yes. Because the researcher said yes in her own way by writing the notes. Because opening a door when you don't know what's on the other side is not compassion, it's arrogance. You don't know what happens if they get through. You don't know where the road goes. You don't know what's on the other end. You don't even know if the door closed by accident or if someone closed it on purpose." That sentence hit me like a truck. Someone closed it on purpose. The door used to exist. It was real. It was in the valley. And it closed. And Deb was right. I had no idea whether it closed because of geological shift, or temporal erosion, or whatever passes for entropy at that scale, or whether something, some other agency, some other party, had looked at what was walking through and decided the door needed to be shut. And if it was shut on purpose, then opening it wasn't mercy. It was. I don't know what it was. I still don't know. I left the station on August 16th, 2 days later. Deb drove me to Cook City personally and waited while I got in my car, and she stood in the parking lot of the Exxon station and watched me until I turned the corner, and I did not look in the rearview mirror because I was afraid of what I would see in her face. I still have the shape. It's been 9 months and I can still feel it. It's not a thought I can describe or a piece of information I can share. It's a spatial awareness, like knowing where north is, except instead of north, it points toward the place in the Lamar Valley where the door used to be. I can feel it right now, sitting in my mother's basement in Bozeman, 200 miles from the valley. The feeling doesn't fade. If anything, it is very slowly getting sharper. I did not get the permanent position. I did not get a recommendation from Deb. My seasonal contract ended with service satisfactory, not recommended for rehire. Deb's words. I am not angry at her. She was protecting the next crew from me. From the thing I'm carrying, the shape that might make me walk back into the valley during the next storm season, which starts in about 8 weeks. I want to tell you the part I haven't told anyone. On the last night before I left, after Deb had gone to bed and the station was quiet, I went out to the compound and stood in the grass, and I looked at the valley in the moonlight. No storm, no lightning, just the valley, silver and enormous and silent. And I could see the road, not lit up, not glowing, but visible, the way a path is visible in a forest even when no one is on it. A subtle difference in texture, a compression, a memory in the land. I could see it running through the grass, north to south, ancient and patient and worn, and I could see, halfway between the station and the river, a place where the road was slightly different, slightly thinner, as if the surface of the world was stretched there, as if you could push your finger through it like a soap bubble. The door, not open, not closed, just thin, waiting, the way a scar is thinner than the skin around it. I stood there for a long time and I felt the travelers on the other side of the thinness, felt them the way you feel a crowd in the next room through a wall. Their weight and presence and exhaustion, walking, always walking, circling the same road, passing the same scar, unable to see it from their side even though from mine it was so obvious, so clear, so simple. I went back to my cabin. I packed my bags. I'm telling you this for 3 reasons. First, because the Lamar Buffalo Ranch Field Campus operates every summer with seasonal staff who are not told about the storm protocol until they've been on site for weeks, and who are given a laminated card with rules designed for a version of the phenomenon that no longer exists, and who are managed by a woman who is brave and competent, and who is maintaining a containment fiction with a clipboard and a coffee mug, and 11 years of white-knuckle discipline that is quietly failing. Those people deserve to know. Second, because I can feel the shape getting sharper, and I don't know what that means, and I am afraid of what I might do when storm season starts and the pool becomes active again. I am afraid that the compassion I feel for the travelers is not entirely my own. I am afraid it was planted. I am afraid that the wider sight I experienced for 4 seconds on August 14th left behind more than a geometric shape, that it left behind an imperative, a longing, a directional urge that is growing inside me the way a tree grows around a nail, slowly and irreversibly, until the nail is part of the tree, and the tree doesn't remember being whole. Third, and this is the reason that keeps me awake, because I don't think the door is going to stay thin forever. I think the travelers are doing something to it from their side. I think every passage, every storm, every time they walk past that scar, they wear it down a little more. I think the door is going to open on its own. Not this year, maybe not this decade, but eventually. And when it does, the travelers will come through, and they will be so grateful and so relieved and so enormous. And they will flood into this world the way water floods through a broken dam. And they will not mean to harm us, and they will not even notice us. And the scale of what they are will be incompatible with the scale of what we are, and we will be overwritten. All of us, not killed, not destroyed, overwritten, the way Kevin Aldiss was overwritten. A body with the lights on and nobody home, standing in the grass, staring at nothing, while something unspeakably vast moves through the space where your selfhood used to be. I don't know how to stop it. I don't know if the people who closed the door the first time are still around to close it again. I don't know if the shape in my mind is a weapon or a key or a compass or a tumor. I don't know if I should go to the valley and try to reinforce the scar, or if going to the valley is exactly what the shape wants me to do. I don't know if Deb is right, that the protocol is better than nothing, or if the protocol is the problem. If decades of silence and compliance and don't look, don't listen, don't answer have allowed the scar to thin precisely because no one was willing to confront it. I know that the Lamar Valley will be staffed again in June. I know there will be storms. I know the laminated card will come out of the envelope and new seasonal rangers will read it, and some of them will follow the rules, and some of them will be curious, and some of them will hear their names on the radio, and one of them, sooner or later, will answer. And I know that I can feel the road from 200 miles away, right now, this minute, pulling at something behind my eyes. The travelers are walking. They are always walking. And the ground where the door used to be is getting thinner all the time. If you work for the Park Service and you get assigned to Lamar, you need to understand something that the laminated card will not tell you. The rules are not wrong. Covering the windows, killing the lights, staying inside, refusing to answer. All of that is correct. But the rules assume the thing outside is passing through. And it isn't. It is circling. It has been circling for geological ages. It is wearing a groove in reality itself. And the rules don't have a procedure for what happens when the groove gets deep enough to become a channel, and the channel gets wide enough to become a passage, and the passage opens into your valley on a Tuesday night in August while you're sleeping in a cabin with blackout panels over the windows and a laminated card on your nightstand. There is no rule for the door opening. There is no protocol for what comes through. The only instruction I can give you is the one Deb gave me, the one that saved my life, the one that I believe with my whole heart and my whole mind, even as the shape behind my eyes grows sharper, and the pull grows stronger and the road gets clearer every day. Do not answer. Do not help. Do not open the door. Whatever is on the other side of that door may be suffering, may be ancient, may be sincere. But it is too large for this world, and this world is too small for it. And the door was closed for a reason, and the reason may be the only thing standing between us and an extinction that doesn't even know it's an extinction. Storm season starts in 8 weeks. The shape in my mind is pointing south-southeast. The Lamar Valley is south-southeast of Bozeman. I am not going to go. I am not going to go. I am not going to go. But I want you to know that I can see the road from here. I can see it with my eyes closed. And it's getting brighter.